So with the Washington football team set to face the Los Angeles Chargers this Sunday at 1 p.m. on CBS, obviously at FedEx Field, I wanted to take a look at some of the Los Angeles Chargers' biggest weakness that Washington could possibly take advantage of that's going to help them lead to victory this Sunday. So when you look at the Los Angeles Chargers roster, the first weakness that I noticed was their interior defensive line. When you look at their interior defensive line, the first person that comes off of your note or off of your head when you think of that position group for the Chargers is Linval Joseph. Last year, Linval Joseph didn't have a good year, and his counterpart, Jared Tillery, haven't either. When Jared Tillery was drafted, they expected this guy to come in here and be a force, but he really hasn't lived up to that. Now, it's time for that to change, obviously, but he really hasn't developed how Los Angeles expected him to. Now, when you look at their defensive line group, another person that has really been that guy for them, he had a decent year this past year, was Christian Covington. He's a guy that was really solid for them last year, although Linval Joseph and Jared Tillery wasn't. He was the guy that really stood out for them. Overall, that interior defensive line is really weak. When you look at Linval Joseph, he hasn't really been that elite run stuffer that he was in Minnesota, and I don't know if he really was ever elite, but he was really good in Minnesota. And like I said, Jerry Tillery hasn't really developed how the Los Angeles Chargers thought he was going to, and Christian Covington, he had a solid year last year, but it wasn't nothing to blow your socks off. So I do think this is a position group that Washington could take advantage of this Sunday, and that's going to help them lead to victory. So I'm telling you, don't be surprised if Antonio Gibson is having 30, 25 carries, and he's absolutely shredding this interior defensive line. Another weakness that I noticed when I was looking at the Los Angeles Chargers position groups in their roster, something similar to Washington. Their linebacking core is not that good. I know we drafted Jamin Davis and we have Cole Holcomb, but similar to us, they don't have a good linebacking core just yet. Although our upside of the linebacking core is way better than theirs because we have a first round pick and we have the emergence of Cole Holcomb. We're not there yet, and I'm talking as a whole, our three starters, and we know how putrid our depth is too. So although we're on the rise as far as our linebacking core, it's still a lot of work that needs to be done to be an elite linebacking core, and same could be said for the Los Angeles Chargers. Although their linebacking core is a lot worse than ours, we're still in that category when it comes. Now, don't get me wrong, their linebacking core is much worse than ours. If you look at the linebacking core for the Los Angeles Chargers, the two names that come off the paper is Kenneth Murray, who I'm not very familiar with, and Drew Tranquil, who I'm not too familiar with, but I did some research on them, and it says they make an above average duo, but the pair are still relatively inexperienced, and Tranquil is coming back from an injury that kept him out for the entire 2020 season. Their talent in the position group, but there are so many question marks. Now, I had to do a little bit of research right here live on their linebacking core because obviously I know who Kenneth Murray is, but I wasn't familiar with Drew Tranquil, and obviously he was out for all of last year, so that's probably why I didn't know who he really was. But similar to our group, we have two good linebackers. We have Jamin Davis, who is growing, and we have Cole Holcomb. Man, I mean, you can kind of say John Bostic maybe, but outside of those three and Khaleke Hudson, we don't have nobody at linebacker. I know that's why a lot of people wanted to get McKinney. I believe he played for Houston. I know a lot of you guys wanted KJ Wright. I was a fan of KJ Wright, and this was months ago, just to bring in a veteran to, you know, cut the slack for like a Jamin Davis, because we know he's still growing. Although we know he's going to be out there, we know he's still growing, and maybe some plays where he's, you know, messing up, we can put in a guy like a KJ, but not Drake McKinney. Sorry about that. So I understand why a lot of you out there wanted a linebacker, because we obviously need it for the depth. Now, our three is way better than the Los Angeles Chargers, don't get me wrong. John Bostic isn't the best, but he's better than any of the guys that they have on their roster, and that's another position group that I think we could take advantage of. We could probably come out in some formations that's going to help us with the passing game, have Logan Thomas lined up against a linebacker, hopefully maybe a slot receiver lined up against a linebacker of theirs, because they don't have that athletic linebacker that's going to be able to keep up with the Logan Thomas or even Adam Humphries in the slot sometimes, so you know we can go out wide and get a slot receiver on linebackers. But I think their linebacking core is another weakness for them, and that's another spot that we can take advantage of this Sunday. I know a lot of people may find this as a surprise, but another weakness that I see on the Los Angeles Chargers roster is their receiving core. Outside of Keenan Allen and Terrell Williams, who do they really have? And Terrell Williams is a guy that's really solid when healthy, but that's his main problem. He's rarely healthy. When he's out there, he is a force. He's a guy that you can just throw it up to and he's going to come down with it 9 times out of 10, but his problem is he cannot stay healthy. Now look at the Los Angeles Chargers wide receiving core as a whole. You have Josh Palmer, Jalen Gustin, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and KJ Hill. Now KJ Hill is a guy that I wanted us to draft last year to pair up with Terry McLaurin, and when I thought Dwayne Haskins was going to be the future quarterback of this franchise. But other than Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, who is really a threat? Not to mention, although he isn't a wide receiver, they lost Hunter Henry to free agency, so they really don't have that many weapons on that offense outside of Keenan Allen and Terrell Williams. And specifically for that wide receiving core, does Jalen Gustin scare you? As much as I wanted KJ Hill, does he really scare you outside of special teams department? Does Josh Palmer really scare you? So you see what I'm saying here? I think honestly this may be their biggest weakness headed into week 1 versus us, because outside of Keenan Allen, who is your most consistent pass catcher? Terrell Williams, who's really solid, not elite at all, but he's rarely healthy. So this is going to be interesting to see who they put out there and who's going to be that guy that's going to step up alongside Keenan Allen, because I think this defense of ours could have a really good day against these wide receivers, because it's not really nothing there for Los Angeles. So another weakness that I think Washington could take advantage of to possibly win this game this Sunday is the Los Angeles Chargers' weakness in their secondary. Outside of Derwin James and Chris Harris, who really else comes to your mind when you think of the Los Angeles Chargers? Although Michael Davis had a really good year last year, do you really think he's going to be able to keep up with Terry McLaurin? This is the guy that's most likely going to be shadowing Terry McLaurin, and let me put that in question marks because they don't really have a guy that can shadow a number 1 wide receiver. Chris Harris is good, but he's very old. Derwin James is one of the best safeties in all of football when healthy, but that is his issue. He's rarely healthy. He's coming off of a season-ending injury last year, and they have Asante Samuel Jr., who is a rookie, and he can possibly be good for them, but it's his first game in the NFL. You know it takes time for players to develop, and maybe I could be wrong. Maybe he could be a guy and one of those rookies that just gets it, and that could just come out the gates flying, but I highly doubt that. So when you look at that secondary outside of Mike Davis, who is their best corner by far, I know Chris Harris Jr. has, you know, the portfolio, and he's the veteran and he's done more in the league, but as of right now in this state of his career, Mike Davis is the best cornerback on the Chargers, and even he isn't the best in the NFL or even one of the better corners in the NFL, let me put it that way. And I don't think he can keep up with the Terry McLaurin, although they do have some young pieces in that secondary that is going to take time to develop and possibly be good in the future, i.e. Asante Samuel Jr. Right now, I think they're not going to be able to keep up with Washington's wide receiving core, with Terry McLaurin being the lone number 1, with Curtis Samuel, with De'Ami Brown, with Adam Humphries, with a sprinkle in of maybe Dax Milne here and there. I just don't think their cornerbacks are ready for this high-powered Washington offense. And yes, I'm using the word high power just because I expect a lot of things out of this young wide receiving core. The last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the Los Angeles Chargers is edge depth. And I know we're spoiled with edge rushers, that being Chase Young and Montez Sweat, but when you look at the Los Angeles Chargers edge rushing and edge rushing depth, they don't have anybody to go along with Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa is one of the best edge rushers in all of football. He coming straight out of the Ohio State University, where our Chase Young comes from, but he doesn't have that Robin that Chase Young's have, and everybody doesn't get that luxury of having, you know, a Montez Sweat on their team, but they don't really have anybody else that can really create edge rushing pressure on a consistent basis like a Joey Bosa. So I do think Washington is going to have to take advantage of that depth, because when he comes comes out of the game, they don't really have anybody else that's going to be able to create pressure against Washington. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Fitzpatrick has all day to throw. And when Ryan Fitzpatrick has a clean pocket and all day to throw, that's when he can become really dangerous. So there you have it. I want to give you guys my 5 biggest weaknesses for the Los Angeles Chargers that we could take advantage of this Sunday that's going to help us get the victory versus the Los Angeles Chargers. So yeah, man, it's me, your boy Juan Gotti. Like, comment, subscribe, hell to the Washington football team. Let me know how you guys feel about this video down below. What are some weaknesses on the Los Angeles Chargers that you think we can attack that I didn't name? As always, it's me, your boy Juan Gotti. Like, comment, subscribe, hell to the Washington football team. I'm out. Peace. Cost me one time, that's gonna get you pop, get you drop, slide.